Hello and welcome to the Choir Conductor Podcast. I am Zach Thompson. We are here at the Choral Panorama Convention, and my guest today is Cathy Montero. Nice to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Zach.
So let's start by having you talk about your musical upbringing.
My musical upbringing, well, first of all, I was adopted, and my family that I grew up with was not musical. No one was musical, but I would come home from church on Sunday mornings and go to the piano even as early as 3 or 4 and pick out the melodies of the hymns that we had sung. And, I was the first one to volunteer to jump up in the children's choir and sing a solo, and I just loved music. And then no one could figure out where that came from.
So you started at a very young age, eventually with piano, joined a choir, and then was there a moment that you decided, yes, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life?
Not until later in college, actually. I had taken piano lessons. My mom thought that was very important, and I never learned to read music. My piano teacher, I faked him out for very many years, and he didn't know that I didn't know how to read music. And I finally got to high school and joined the band. And when I played my saxophone and I noticed the notes on the paper and the notes that I was playing, it sort of made sense. I went home and retaught myself how to actually read music. We didn't have a choir in high school, so I stayed with band, became drum major, and decided that, well, music was the thing I loved to do most. And so I went to college for music. I thought at that point it was going to be performance, but about halfway through my freshman year, I had actually begun to teach at our church, the children's choir, and I missed it so much that I changed my major to music ed.
Oh, wow. And where did you go to college?
I started off in Lakeland at Florida Southern, and I transferred down to University of Miami halfway through my sophomore year.
Nice. And so how did you fake your way through the piano? Did you just learn everything by ear, or how did that work?
Sort of a combination. So my piano students can't fake their way because I know all the tricks.
Yeah.
But my piano teacher would play the new song and say, it goes like this, and I would kind of fumble my way through and go home and forget about it for a week and go back, and he would circle all the sharps or flats, so I knew that if it was circled, it had to be one of those black notes, and I played by ear.
And then your band director hands you some music, and he says, sight read, and you're like, what?
I figured it out from there because I did not want to be last chair. All my friends were saxophone players. We had a beginning band full of saxophones, and I didn't want to be last chair, so I figured it out.
Yeah, so that's the competitive personality will get people to either learn it very quickly or drop out.
Pretty much.
Yeah, that's great. And so whenever you were in college, what made you kind of switch towards the choir side from being piano and band for most of your life?
Well, we had to take both chorus and band in college, and it was my first time ever being in a choral situation other than church choir. And the first day there, it just was the most glorious thing I'd ever heard. And so, I mean, I loved band, but it just, something clicked, and I went vocal performance for a while, and then decided that I'd rather be in the education portion than the entertainment or performing on my own, and so that's where I went.
Yeah, that's great. And talk about where you're currently teaching and what you're doing for a living right now.
I am teaching at a middle school. I know, scary. This is my 7th year there, and it is, I have piano and I have chorus. When I first started there were 2 general music classes, and each had 50 plus students in them. So my second year, I had convinced all of the kids in the general music class that they needed to go into chorus or piano, and we didn't have a piano lab at that point, so I bargained with my principal and said, but I have all these students and they want to learn piano. So I got my first piano lab. It started with 2 classes, and now I'm up to 3 classes of piano, and the rest are chorus. For 3 years, we didn't have a band teacher, and I didn't want to lose the band program, so I actually taught band for 3 years. And so now, things are kind of boring. I only have piano and chorus.
Wow. So piano, band, and chorus in middle school.
Yes.
That's about as exciting as it gets.
Insane, but exciting.
But I guess it's good that you're kind of your own recruitment and your own feeder program. You say, hey, oh, you like the band? How about chorus? Oh, you're in piano. You should join band. And then it's a lot easier that way. So that does have an advantages. And so when you went to college, did you always want to teach middle school, or is this kind of a more recent development after college?
Okay, so seriously, Zach, no one ever starts out wanting to teach middle school.
Some people do. Some people are, they're rare.
My first teaching experience was in middle school. Actually, it was back in, I won't tell you how long ago, but it was the traditional junior high. So it was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. It was an inner city school in Miami, and it was crazy. So I left there after the first year because the distance was so great for me to travel each day, and I was offered a job at a private school. And the private school was preschool 3-year-olds through 6th grade for general music, and 2 bands and 2 choruses. So I taught there for 7 years. So many of those students I had from the time that they were 3 till they graduated from there in 6th grade. So 9 years I had those children, and then their siblings, and then their cousins, and it was wonderful. By the time I left there, I actually was teaching the child of a former student. So that was great. I enjoyed elementary school, and then when I moved to a different county, I moved up to Central Florida, and went to an elementary school, started there, and then an opportunity came for me to also teach at a high school, 1 class, and then they expanded that and said, well, teach at the elementary school, teach at the high school, but we also want you to do 1 class of chorus at the middle school. And so I was actually doing all levels of music at that time. I left that school and took the job that I have now, and it's solely middle school, and I think it's the best thing I've ever done. I realize now that I'm just a middle school teacher. That's it.
Yeah, it sometimes takes some people some time to figure out where they're the best suited for their abilities, even though in their mind they might think, no, I'm really good at this, and this is the only where I want to be. But once you start teaching, you're like, no, this is where I belong. It only took me, a few days to figure out that I'm not suited for kindergarten. So I first started teaching kindergarten through 8th grade, and so it didn't take me that long to figure it out. But it was good experience, and now I can say I've taught kindergarten through 12th grade and college. But you never know where you're going to end up, even though a lot of people in their mind say I will do this. Well, you might not, because you need a job, and you never know what you're going to be doing.
I will die on the podium of a middle school chorus. That's where I will be.
That's great. And you're also the district chair for District 12 of the Florida Vocal Association here in Florida. And so talk about your responsibilities, why you chose to be the district chair, and then kind of the whole overall philosophy of the state of Florida for choral music, because it's not like every other state. I've lived in several other states, and Florida's kind of a very special place.
Well, actually, I'm relatively new to the public school system, where there is the Florida Vocal Association organization for you to belong. When I was the first 17 years when I was at the private school, we weren't part of that. And when I moved up to Central Florida, I was solely elementary, and so there's another component organization, and I was very much involved with that. But it wasn't until I began to teach at the high school level that I became part of the Florida Vocal Association. So a lot of things were very new to me. There was so much support in our district that I became more active in just the events that were going on. And so several years ago, our district chair, and at that time was leaving to move out of state, and then the coordinator who would be taking his place came to me and asked if I would mind moving into that capacity and be the coordinator for 2 years, and then eventually roll up into the chair. And so I said, sure, if you'll teach me what I have to do. So for the first 2 years, I was the coordinator and worked side by side with the chair. And then last year was my first year to move into the position of chair. I'm not sure typically what other districts do. I kind of have fallen into the role, not necessarily on purpose, but because of the events that have transpired in our district. We have so many new directors that have really very little experience in a choral classroom, and maybe they weren't in a situation where they had a lot of experience beforehand. So I found myself in the last couple of years more or less in a role of overall mentor or mother. And so I find that I answer a lot of questions and do a lot of guidance, and I love it. I love it. I mean, if I've figured something out and I can help you with it, I am, pleased to do that. So we do have a relatively young district, and it's exciting because I know that the strength, lies in the longevity of the directors. And so, as an older director, I know that my time will come to an end, but I feel very confident that you younger directors are, going to keep it moving. And, the future of music education in our district and in Central Florida is something very promising.
Yeah, I think you're doing a great job, by the way. You've helped me out a lot already. But so I came from teaching. So I grew up in Pennsylvania, taught in North Carolina. I kind of observed some things in Tennessee when I did my master's there, and now I'm here in Florida. And each state was very different in their ways. Florida, I think, is one of the more organized and more well-rounded and more intense about their music than most other states. I hear a lot of people say, oh, Texas and Florida, and we're always like right behind. And I think it is a kind of a special state to be teaching choir music. Have you have any thoughts about that, or have you observed or heard other people talk about, oh, I came into Florida and it's a little bit different?
In the years that I've been attending things like the Choral Panorama and all-state conferences where we have clinicians come in from other states, that is one of the things that they continually have said, is that Florida is very advanced or very passionate about music education, and that's all I've ever known. I have seen over the past, so I've been teaching for 32 years. I will say that 32 years ago when I began, Florida was not like that. It was a little disconnected, and the district that I started in, I did not receive the help or the guidance or the encouragement that I have received in the last 20 years. And specifically up in Central Florida. I do know now that the district I was in has come a very, very, very long way. So I think that Florida as a whole has decided that music education is something that we want to provide to all of our students. It is a necessary part of education. It's a necessary part of development. And so I think that, those that came before me and my peers, and then you guys who are coming, along now, I think that we're going to keep that passion, that drive, and I think that's going to keep us on top.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to have even just the whole district MPA, state MPA. Just that alone is such a huge thing that most states don't do, and then to have such a large music education convention that's like nationally known, and it's when I was used to like the smaller ones when I first came. I couldn't understand. Like the only thing I could equate it to was going to like ACDA National. It was almost on that standard and that wide of a thing. So let's talk about if you have a favorite musical experience, either as a performer or as an audience member.
So there are a lot. I think one of my most treasured experiences happened about 10 years ago. When I first moved up to Central Florida, I was approached to start a community children's chorus, and it was called the Lake Wales Youth Choral. And it was an auditioned group, and we started with one choir and eventually moved into 3 leveled choirs. And in Lake Wales, where I currently live, there is a historical site called Bach Tower, and it's a beautiful historical tower and gardens. And while I was directing the youth chorale, the Bach Tower approached me and said, "We are coming up on the 80th anniversary of Bach Tower, and we want to do a big celebration, and we want the youth chorale to perform." So we performed at the celebration, and we were set up in front of the tower, and there's a balcony above where we were performing, and if you've never seen it, it's really a grand and glorious, beautiful tower. And as we were singing the last refrain of the song, above our heads they released doves, white doves, and they circled around the tower and came back over us. And I wasn't really watching the doves until they came back around. It was just beautiful around the tower and through this beautiful, serene, peaceful setting and over the heads of my choir, and it was breathtaking. There was not much that could top it. And then 5 years later, they asked that we come back again and do the 85th anniversary. And we did something we've never done before. There's a big carillon up in the top of the tower, and they wanted us to coordinate for the choir to sing with the carillon playing for us. So literally, we had practiced, and by walkie-talkie, the carillon player began, and the choir singing at the base of the tower, it actually worked. And so 2 of my most beautiful, breathtaking moments were at Bach Tower.
Yeah, it's great. I didn't realize you're not that far away from me. I always pictured most people in Polk County living so far away. I'm not that far from Bach Tower. I've yet to go there, but I hear it's beautiful. And I probably should sometime since I don't live that far away. So what advice would you give your younger self?
That's a really hard one.
Or if not yourself, what advice would you give to all of us younger directors and conductors that are in your district that are making our way through our careers?
I think that if I had the opportunity to go back and change anything about my experiences or my life, I would probably search or push for a choral program for me in middle school and high school. I didn't have one. So I missed out on, that developmental stage of just being in a choral ensemble. The band was great, and I did sing in the youth choir, but it's not the same. And I wish that there had been an opportunity. I didn't know at that point that was something that would be valuable. I didn't know that it was something that I would later in years long for. But I think that would be one thing. If I were to tell younger directors anything, it would probably be never stop being teachable. I learn something every day. There's, I learn from you guys. I learn from my students. I learn because because learning is how you keep going. Learning is how things stay fresh. And so never stop looking for ways to learn something.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's why I like coming to these conferences or the FMEA. Even if you learn one thing, that conference was worth it. Sometimes you learn a lot of things. Sometimes you only learn one, but it's still worth it. And that's great advice. And it's sometimes hard, especially for young people, to listen and to learn, and instead of just barrel their way through it and be ultra confident and headstrong. But yeah, that's great advice. If I had advice for myself, I would tell myself to learn piano earlier.
That's a good one also.
Because I started very late and I'm still making up for it now, as my students can tell you. Do you have a favorite book?
My favorite book when I was younger was Wuthering Heights. In latter years, I have 5 children, so I've read so many children's books to my children. My daughter, my youngest daughter, said the other day that her favorite books that we read as a child was there's a series, there's Skippy John Jones, and so those were always very fun to read to my children and with my children. So I don't know what I have now.
Yeah. Yeah, once you become a parent, your interests start to go away, and it's all about your kids. And my daughter uses the excuse to stay up later. She says, more books. And, well, no, it's bedtime. More books. But yeah. Other than music, do you have any hobbies?
I used to. I don't remember what they were.
And then you had kids?
And so for the last 28 years, my hobbies have been my children.
Yeah, that's what I see happening to myself. It's work and then kids, and then you don't have much time for anything else.
One day I'll remember what they were.
Or when are they all off to college yet?
My 3 older ones, one is in the Navy, one is just graduated from college and is a minister and is also going to be teaching math at my school this year.
Wow.
It's going to be interesting. And then my 3rd one is graduating with her music ed degree in December. And then I have 2 that are twins that are at a School of the Arts, and they will be juniors this year. So a couple more years and they'll all be out the door.
Great. And then you can find some hobbies.
Yeah, I'll find some hobbies.
That's excellent.
Or a book to read.
Yeah. Do you have any interesting or noteworthy songs or performances coming up for this season for your choirs?
I'm not sure. I know that our school demographics have changed a bit. We had 5th grade up until this year, and then 5th grade is no longer on our campus, but we've doubled in size in 6th grade. So my 6th grade used to be my beginning choir, and it was around 40, and according to my assistant principal last week, it may be upwards of 60. So now I'm not sure exactly. Things I had thought I might put together may not work just for sheer numbers and logistics, but we'll see when school starts.
Yeah, that's a lot of 6th graders at one time. Wow. Yeah. That's great. And I'd like to end the podcast with this question. I got this from another podcast called Invest Like the Best. I guess one of my hobbies when I'm not learning about music is learning about finance, which is kind of equally nerdy, but that's just, I don't know, that's what I like. I guess because I'm trying to find ways to make my career work for my family in ways that teaching doesn't always come easy with money, and so that's kind of what I do on the side. But his question that I got is, what is the kindest thing anyone has ever done for you?
At my current position, my first year there, it was probably within the first month or so of school, and as I was taking stock of things that I had in my supply closet or in um, uh, my music library, and I had kept a running list of things that eventually I'm going to need or I would like to have, and I hadn't said anything to anyone. It was just a list. It was on a notepad on a clipboard, and I had it up on my wall next to my desk with the thumbtack, and it wasn't anything I'd asked for, and it's just things as I would go through and say, oh, this would be nice to have. I was teaching general music at that point, so it'd be great to have this publication or this supply or whatever. And so I had quite a lengthy list, and I knew that when the time came, I would maybe whittle it down and ask for the most important things that I thought were the most necessary. And hadn't gotten to that point yet. And I walked in one morning, and on my desk was a box, and it had over half of those things in it. And someone had taken my list and crossed off those things that were in the box. And I just started crying. I was like, where did this come from? And, who did this? And I didn't ask for any of these things. It was just an ongoing thought. And no one said anything. And so I went to my principal and I said, these things are on my desk. She goes, yeah, next time you need something, just let me know. You don't have to make a list. And she had just gone into my room and seen the list and decided that, it was worth the investment, and purchased them and put them on my desk without saying a word. And I just thought, I'm in heaven. The fact that I had support without even asking for it.
That's an amazing principle.
Yeah, it is.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. What a generous gift.
Very much.
Thank you for being generous with your time and
thank you.
Coming on my podcast. And thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks.